the climate resilient agriculture, we were still visualizing climate change as something that will come in 2040, 2050 and so on. But in 2025, or actually 24, the Center for Science and Environment, when they counted the number of days when there was extreme weather in one or the other part of the country, there were as many as 322 out of 366 days. So almost 88% of, say, somewhere or other, there were either cyclone or hailstorm or flooding or extreme cold temperature or a heat wave. And that's a kind of a advancement that happened with respect to climate change. I mean, agriculture is possibly the most vulnerable sector when it comes to climate change. Even in one of the earlier sessions, we heard about the number of people dependent on agriculture and the level of productivity. And on top of that, if you look at climate, then you know the result. At the same time, agriculture also contributes to greenhouse gases, whether from the methane in the dairy sector or the puddling rice or fertilizer usage or the burning of stubble. Many of these add significantly to the greenhouse gases. Nearly 15% of all greenhouse gas in India is coming out of the agriculture. So from that sense, when you're talking about innovating for climate resilience in agriculture, we are talking about both the resilience in terms of how to deal with this vulnerability, as also how to mitigate and reduce those greenhouse gas release from the sector. And in this discussion, we will look at what are the innovations in the area of science and technology in markets, as also how do we take it to the millions of small farmers in adopting or across the whole value chain where it is relevant, all the way to post-harvest and processing. And finally, what are the policy aspects, measures that will really take it to population scale. And before we commence the panel discussion, we'll have Dr. Ramesh Chand speaking to us the overview of the climate change in agriculture and the several innovations and the policy perspectives. And thereafter, we'll have a conversation among the panelists. So, Dr. Ramesh Chand.
Thank you, Shiv Kumar ji. Let me first say a few things about the specificity of relationship between climate change and agriculture. I would like to mention two specificities. One is that the relationship between climate and agriculture is two-way, whereas in other sector, you just find it is only one way. You have an industry, you are running a car, so you are causing emission. The emission is not affecting your production or your performance of your bike. But in case of agriculture, yes, there is a emission in agriculture. For example, in India, the 13 to 14% of total emission is contributed by agriculture, and climate change also affects performance of agriculture. The second specificity is that emissions from agriculture are invisible, which is not the case in most other sectors. Like if you speak to a farmer and tell him that your paddy fields, if it is grown under submerged condition, 24 hours it is emitting greenhouse gases. Or the dairy or cow which you are keeping, it is releasing methane, which is very harmful for environment. I think the farmer will feel offended that I am doing something, supplying you food, but is this nonsense you are talking that my activities are causing damage to environment and climate? But this is a fact, and partly because it is invisible, and because of that it is happening. And that also sometimes throws a challenge in addressing climate. The second issue which I want to share with you, that many a time you just read that some research article will tell us that if temperature rise with ½ degree Celsius or 1 degree Celsius, then yield of wheat will decline by so much, floods, drought, all those things will start happening. But if you look at the actual situation, so far you don't see decline in yield of any crop in India, even though we are observing some of the event mentioned by Shivakumarji that these things are happening. So what is this? Is it that there is a contradiction between what science says and what we are actually experiencing? And if you calculate the instability index of agriculture production, you see there is a sharp decline in that instability index. So how do you then relate climate change that is ongoing with performance of agriculture? I think that is important to understand, otherwise we may undermine the importance or effect of climate change on agriculture. The reason that despite climate change happening, rise in temperature, emission happening, yield are increasing, productivity is increasing, that is because science and technology, R&D, so far is able to counter the adverse effect of climate change. For instance, if because of climate change in 30 years we expected wheat yield to go down by 4%, science saw to it that new varieties are developed and yield actually went up by 20%, and negating the climate change effect, you find that actual increase in yield is 14%. So this aspect again very important, that what we are observing, if you are not seeing that decline happening, that doesn't mean climate change is not happening. But so far I would say that R&D, science and technology, development of irrigation and many other initiatives, they are so far, they have been helpful in countering the effect of climate change. But as we go on, a stage will come which is called tipping point, that beyond that you cannot do anything using science or using anything. So that is a tipping point when you just find that whatever tolerance you could develop in wheat to tolerate terminal heat, high temperature, you have exhausted the possibilities, so you have no option left. So that is the thing which is also important and need to be kept in mind. When it comes to policy and other measures, to my mind, there are 4 kind of policies and measures which matter for emission, which matter for adaptation, mitigation, and overall addressing the challenge of climate change. One is, I feel that distortion in input and output prices is a very big factor in influencing emissions from agriculture. Let me elaborate it. What do I mean by distortions? Now, if we are giving higher spot price for MSP than what is dictated by demand and supply situation, or if some state government is giving bonus even above what is the MSP declared by central government, it will attract more area under rice. So when that happens, then you just find that if you are not doing that thing, and the crops which are environment friendly, where you find that you never hear any bonus on pulses or oilseed crops, so you just are encouraging through those price policies the crops which are more harmful for environment relative to the effect of other crops on environment. Same thing on input side, that if we are giving, say, free power, and you know that emission in paddy field happen if you keep the field always submerged, then bacteria, the conditions are anaerobic, it start feeding on organic matter, and once it start feeding on organic matter, you just find that the emissions start happening. And if you are not giving free power, then you will find that farmer will make the calculation that marginal cost of irrigation is equal to marginal returns, then he will be encouraged, he or she will be encouraged to adopt technologies where less water is used, going for alternative wetting and drying, going for direct seeded rice, those kind of technologies. So these are two examples of how distortion in input and output can affect prices of input and output can affect climate change. Second is that in order to ensure that there is a minimum emission, some emission will be there under whatever condition we undertake some of the agriculture activities, but they are minimized if you grow the crops in those areas where they are best suited, you grow the crop in those soils on which it is best suited, you grow in those seasons which are best suited for a particular crop. If you deviate from those, you will just find that then the emission will start happening. So we in Niti Yog trying to promote agroclimatic regional plannings, that the kind of production activity which we undertake in different agroecological zones, they should be in sync with what are the natural endowment, what are the soil condition, what is rainfall, and all those things. For example, if you are growing paddy in a state like Bihar, where there is a lot of rainfall and there are floods and fields remain flooded, even if there is no paddy in the soil, the bacterial activity will happen, emission will happen. But if you are growing somewhere else by artificially supplying irrigation, by artificially creating a pond, then you will find that there will be a lot of emission, which otherwise on that land will not be there. So if we grow crop according to agroclimatic regional characteristics, you will find that the emission will be less. The more we deviate from this, higher will be the emission. The third factor is efficiency, that if we use inputs efficiently, like we know that if I take example of fertilizer, that if we are applying say 10 kg of nitrogen in a field, actually only 3.5 kg is used by plant. So rest of 6.5 kg either goes into water or it goes into environment. So it creates even effect on emission also. But if you are able to increase this efficiency, say from 35% to 50% or 60%, you are reducing the emission to that extent. So these are again, technologies are available that if you use input in a particular manner, then the efficiency will increase and the environmental footprint will be much lower according to the gain in efficiency. The fourth aspect is of course productivity, that if we are able to have yield breakthrough, if we are able to increase yield of some crop, again by say 20%, then you can have same output from 20% less land. So then you will be reducing whatever emission happen because of cultivation, because of plowing of soil, etc. You are reducing it to 20%. So yield enhancement is another, I would say, method through which we can reduce emissions. The last measure, of course, is R&D. NICRA is part of that. And there are many other kind of things, district contingency plan, that if we make use of those things, conservation agriculture, wherever possible, zero tillage, cover crop, mixed crop, agroforestry with crops. So there are many practices which are available to us which can reduce the emission effect and contribution to climate change. So these are the 5 measures which at this stage I feel that which are the levers through which government institutions can work to see to it that we are able to adapt to climate change and we are able to contain emissions within limit. Thank you.
Thank you, Rameshji. And towards the end, probably I'll come back to you and ask about the problem about distortions that you raised and how do we really deal with it once we cover some of the other panelists. May I turn to Usha now. And, one of the areas which can do both mitigation as well as resilience is biological inputs, which is your area of specialization and work. Can you expand what really is the innovation in it and what's holding us from mainstreaming biologicals as an important input?
Thank you very much. So just building on the comments which have been made already around climate change, I think most of the time we talk about agriculture as a problem or a contributor, which it is, but it is also a solution to addressing the climate crisis that we find ourselves in. It's also a solution which is immediate, which can be scaled rapidly and in a most cost-effective manner. And I think biologicals is one area. And maybe for many of you, I don't know how familiar you are with biologicals. So for the plants to grow, plants need nutrients. They come in different forms. They come in the form of manure, in the form of urea, or can come in the form of microbes or other elements that you, nature-based solutions that you can apply. And this is something which is not new. It's not that it's not been known. People have been doing it. But it has not been scaled up to the level where you see that 80% of the farmers are using biologicals. If I compare it to Brazil, 90% of the farmers would use for their soybean crop a biological treatment. In India, that number will be 5% to 8% or 10% maybe. So what is the problem? Why is it that we are not seeing that acceptance? I think in the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen significant traction for biological products. And the main reason for the problem of not having the adoption was because consistency of performance. Microbes have been known, but how the products are prepared in terms of you provide a single microbe versus a consortia or a cocktail of microbes. So the farmer needs to see value. If the farmer doesn't see visible value, the farmer is not likely to stick with the product. There is also a slight discrepancy in the market. Dr. Chand made a comment about it. So there's significant subsidy for fertilizer, but there is no equivalent subsidy for biological inputs, which in a sense substitute part of the fertilizer. So the farmer actually has to pay a lot more for this more nature-friendly solution than they have to pay for a regular fertilizer. So that also creates a discrepancy. But I think the availability of a wider range of products now in the form of consortia is enabling farmers. We are seeing consistent growth in acres that farmers are adopting these biological treatments, and a little bit of policy intervention would further facilitate how we can create that positive environment for farmers to go forward with use of these treatments.
Thanks, Usha. I think once again we are getting back to the same issue of distortion and policy. We'll come back to that again at the end. I'll turn to Jay now. One of the resilient approach for the farmers is supposed to be diversification into livestock as something which is an all-season kind of an income. We'll come to the issues that are raised on methane and other aspects a little later, but first let's understand the positive side of the dairy and how it is adding value to farmers and what should one do to really improve resilience in livestock-related incomes.
Thank you, sir, and good evening, everyone. So, for a country that produces practically 25% of the global dairy output and consumes practically every bit of it, where dairy in value terms is bigger than paddy and wheat put together. So I think it is the most important agri-produce. And apart from being the economic backbone, it is also the nutritional backbone because it is the cheapest source of essential nutrition for vegetarians and non-vegetarians alike. Now, when we talk about climate resilience, interestingly, dairy is also the most climate resilient agri-produce. When we look at the top 4 milk producing states in the country, Uttar Pradesh, number 1. Number 2 is Rajasthan, which is practically a dry state. Number 3 is Andhra, which is a coastal state. Number 4 is Gujarat, and the regions of Saurashtra and Kutch, which are producing very high quantities of milk, have a completely different topography. So, dairy in terms of livestock and the resilience of the Indian livestock, I think it is the most climate resilient agri-produce. And as we see the climate change happening and a lot of crop failures also happening across the country, across the world, I think it again re-emphasizes the importance of dairy for the Indian farmer. And a lot of work needs to be done in terms of making it more sustainable because yes, there are questions about sustainability in dairy. And more than climate resilience in terms of dairy, I would say climate sensitivity is something that needs to be brought in, and all research and all interventions are to be focused on that. That will also lead to higher income for the farmers, better produce for the customers, and of course, a better planet for all of us to live in.
Thanks, Jay. Let's move downstream a little bit from the farming and pre-farming and livestock to post-harvest. And now I request Ravi to talk about some of the innovations that are happening in the space of cold chain and possibly also digitalization in that area and off-farm and on-farm kind of opportunities that are available there.
Thank you, Mr. Shivakumar, and good afternoon, everybody. When you look at the evolution of the cold chain sector in India, at least the last 1.5, 2 decades, we put a lot of emphasis on building cold storages. Initially in the period between 2005 and 2014. And after 14, we looked at putting more focus on food processing. And then we looked at FPOs as a great scale generator. But what I see in the last 3-5 years is dramatic innovation happening in the cold chain sector. And I wanted to call out a few examples why this is becoming game changing for especially small farmers. I think the solar energy proliferation in agriculture is becoming a game changer for smaller cold storages like 1 ton, 2 ton actually. Now, one of the significant challenges in our horticulture sector is at farm gate, we lose the quality of the produce and also the value of the produce. But with this solar cold storages that is slowly penetrating into the horticulture sector, at the farm gate level, the farmers are now able to store, on a 1 ton to 5 ton range, quite a lot of daily produces. And at the farm gate level, the pre-cooling is becoming a very innovative application for small cold storages. Earlier, we used to harvest, and either by the evening or by the next day, it reaches a small center where it was kept for further sorting and grading and those kind of activities. Whereas because government has put a lot of focus on solar energy, the solar energy is helping small farmers use at farm gate, and this is really very, very helpful for small farmers actually. And we are seeing a higher penetration by even startup companies like EcoZen, where they are selling quite a number of small cold storages. This is one big change that is happening in the last 3 to 5 years. I think the second big shift that we see is because we have a very good road infrastructure, the reefer model of cold storage is becoming very unique in India. And I think some of the pilots, I think here Pankaj is sitting here, we have a pilot that was done in Kinos, where we picked the Kinos from Punjab and we could reach the Kinos in Bangalore, 2,500 kilometers, and the price realization of the farmer went to 6 times actually. And this is purely reefer. And even now we have not gone on to solar powered reefers or EV based reefers actually. So the potential innovation possibilities are far higher actually. The third area that I clearly see is in the milk industry. I think Mr. Jay Agarwal spoke about milk. I mean, bulk milk collection is a massive network in India. Again here, the solar powered bulk milk collection is dramatically changing the paradigm of diesel usages and completely decarbonizing some of the milk collection sectors in this space as well. I think Amul has taken a lead already on this, and several of the bulk milk storing at 4 degrees is now happening using solar energy mixed with electricity. So as the prices of storage comes lower and lower, you will see a lot more bulk milk cooling also going towards this trend. Now the other important dimension that many startups are uncovering using digitalization, I'll pick an example of Ninja Cart. Ninja Cart is a startup in Karnataka. They are able to put a platform and identify in a 100 kilometer radius what is grown and what is getting harvested. So based on that, they are able to do a supply chain model and put their list prices for tomorrow on what is going to be harvested. So the farm income of the farmers in the 100 kilometer area is also dramatically changing. The landscape is changing here. Now here, quick commerce is redefining India's cold chain sector in my view. Today the quick commerce is also segmenting customers who are really at the premium of the pyramid, and these dark stores which are sitting in the cities today are really needing a very traceable supply chain model to know what is harvested where and where am I getting it from. Because consumers are demanding today, and now the new norm is fresh is the new frozen in terms of quick commerce. So Palak, for example, a city like Chennai, Palak is ordered on Swiggy, Instamart in the morning. You get fresh Palak as an example actually. And people are willing to pay more for Palak as a price as well. But they would like to know from which farm it came, at what temperature it was there, and the whole traceability is there. So digital is also offering us a great opportunity to really limit our supply chain model for horticulture to 100, 150 kilometer radius. And these platforms are becoming extremely game changing. And I think these are innovations which are still not scaled, but I'm very optimistic that as we start scaling these innovations, you will see a lot more farmers' income growing in my view.
Thanks, Ravi. It's really wonderful to hear several innovations in post-harvest just now and before that on biologicals and in the dairy sector itself. The big question that really exists, and that's what I'll pose to Rohtash now, on how do we really take it to the small farmers in their resource-constrained context and do it at population scale, really. All of these obviously are examples that are working and at a certain level of scale, and how do we really take it to a much larger scale so that we become far more resilient and we're also contribute to the mitigation.
Thank you, Shiv. I'll attempt in the short time we have to keep it close to climate issues as well as technology. Let's pick up a few issues that directly affect it. We talked about water, we talked about air. Let's pick up a few examples. All these problems are directly related to technologies that are already available and or are at the brink of being available. The issue centrally is how do these technologies get adopted or adapted at the farmer level? Clearly, no farmer is able to or should take the risk of experimentation. So therefore, the experimentation barrier has to be crossed. And that, with examples, let's talk about a few of them. Let's talk about not mechanization, but technologization. So here is the case in point. If you want to technologize, and let's pick up an example called stubble burning. In stubble burning, the solutions are clearly available. That harvesting, at the same time harvesting takes place, is the time at which the stubble is also collected, whatever the crop may be, and goes back into circulation, technologically speaking. Let's take rice paddy, for example. Immediately, if the stubble is picked up, there are ways of mechanically harvesting the residue, packing it into bales, and now bringing it into either a situation where it is burnt along with coal for power generation, or goes back via anaerobic digestion back into fertilizer, into methane, and so on and so forth. Now, to carry out this, every piece of this is available, and I'm not going to go into what's coming in the way because those are barriers of innovation, but I'm talking about innovation at the present stage. So if these technologies, and we have to cross the barrier of taking away the capital load from the shoulder of the farmer and make technologies available on a pay-for-use basis. This is not a new innovation. It's a recycled innovation of 300 years. When the first horse carriage came and somebody sold tickets per seat on a horse, I mean, something that Uber copied now, or taxis have copied forever. Every service is available, and if you were to pay for use for service, and those are the innovations that have to be made. And these are not innovations in technology. These are innovations in business modeling. And clearly, if I see a gap, Shiv, at the present moment, many experiments have happened, and some successful, some not. But the world is clear that in a circular economy, you have to be able to massify, and no better market than India to do that, massify through a pay-for-use mechanism. Where sometimes we stumble, and those are subject of further discussion, is what comes in the way of who pays for it, how are platforms created, how are, let us say, risks shared. And particularly this is where capital and the color of capital comes in, and that includes governmental capital. Who's going to take the risk? Where is the viability risk going to be shared, and so on? That's the subject of policy and so on. Take another example. Again, we either over-fertilize, under-fertilize, or we fertilize at random. What is fertilizer? Except making up in your bloodstream that very element which is deficient at that moment. So blood testing, right? You will not take in a dosage of 20 chemicals because one element is missing. You do a blood test. Now the problem that arises is the time for picking up soil samples and getting laboratories to do tests to come back into with test results, and for those results to be interpreted and then fertilized accordingly takes a lot of time. Innovation, you are today, and we've done this on a large experimental basis, read the color of the plant leaf using smartphones, digest the pixelation of these colors, and be able to say what are the chemicals that are short at the root level, and be able to just dose that plant with that deficiency of dosage. Now here again, clearly climate impacted, and very, very clearly you take away the risk from the farmer and add to his bottom line. One very important thing to round off, and there are many, many, many examples like this, For paucity of time, I'm limiting this. But the risk of experimentation has to be taken away from the farmer. जो दिखता है वही बिकता है. You have to prove to him that this makes money for you. So what's in it for me is a question that we need to answer. And just to round this off, I haven't seen a smarter businessman in life than the so-called ordinary farmer. If you can prove to him it makes more money, he buys it.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt on that count. On the point of who pays for it, let me turn to Usha for another dimension of it. You know, the high consumer prices and low farmer profitability is an eternal dilemma we have in the Indian context, and something which can really take it off and get someone else pay for all the climate effort is the carbon market, which is another area of expertise that Usha has, and let's try and understand from her what about carbon markets and how do we really scale this and make good use of this in our climate effort.
It's a very complex question, but let me start by asking you, and maybe by show of hand, how many of you would go to the supermarket and buy food and pay extra because the food label says it's good for your heart? How many of you, only 2 people will pay extra? Okay, I see a few more hands. Now imagine a packet which says it's good for the environment. Okay, we have 2-3 people who are still willing to pay for it. But this is the dilemma, right? This is the dilemma that on an average, a consumer is not attuned to thinking about food having a positive impact on the environment, and how do you then capture that premium. So at Grow Indigo, we've been running a carbon program from 2 aspects. One aspect is from generation of carbon credit by encouraging farmer to adopt regenerative agriculture practice. And when I say regenerative agriculture, that means it improves soil health, it increases biodiversity, it creates higher income opportunities, and so on and so forth. So going from transplanted rice to direct seeded rice is a perfect example, or low tillage, no tillage would be another example of a regen ag practice. So when the carbon credit is generated, this carbon credit our expectation is for a high quality, science-backed, good integrity carbon credit, the price would be in the range of $30 to $40 per credit. Now 75% of that credit value goes back to the farmer. Now that becomes a new cash crop for the farmer, which encourages the farmer to stick with the regenerative agriculture practice. So having this financial incentive for the farmer, rather than telling the farmer, don't burn the straw because it is good for people who live in Delhi, we say, I'm giving you an income source so that that straw is used in a different way, so you make money and it's good for the environment. So so this is one aspect of the carbon credit, and the other one is the low carbon footprint produce. So if you had wheat which sequestered more carbon in soil, then food companies are willing to pay a little premium to the farmer, and then they will of course claim it in against their ESG goals or net zero targets which have been set. So this is another angle from a sustainable produce standpoint that Grow Indigo is working on. When we talk about scale, I mean, for a company like us, we have about 1 million hectares which are registered in Punjab, Haryana in the carbon program, which is a decent scale. But when you think about the country and think about 140 million hectares, you know, the opportunity is tremendous, but we have a long way to go. And the possibility of getting there is I'm very optimistic that we can get to a good number there. But having a policy intervention or clarity from a commercial agriculture standpoint would certainly help. Because at the moment we are not clear, as it is not part of the Government of India's NDCs, commercial agriculture, it creates a little bit of a confusion as to in which areas you can operate from a carbon market standpoint. And so these would be some of the things that we would be looking to the government for clarity to move forward more aggressively on the carbon market front.
Thanks, Usha. Let's turn to the other dimension of dairy and ask Jay, because we said dairy is one of the biggest issues when it comes to GHG emissions. While it is great from resilience and every other perspective, from a farm income perspective and all that, how do we really address this issue of the emissions from livestock?
So as I said, we produce 25% of the global output of milk. We have a bovine animal population of 31 crores in the country. Now that's a huge population for producing that kind of milk. And so by far we are the biggest emitters of all greenhouse gases pertaining to dairying. We all know that methane and water consumption are two aspects of animal husbandry which are critical. And some simple solutions, very simple solutions. I mean, we have come a long way since 1998 to till now, but I think we are still very far from where we should be. So I would say that our average per animal output of milk per day is 5 liters. Now, it is distributed unevenly across the country. So in a state like Punjab, where there is slightly more advanced agriculture practices, it is 15 liters. So for the same animal, so say in UP, the same animal is producing 5 liters of milk, and in Punjab, the same animal is producing 15 liters of milk. So this is the big gap that needs to be filled. And there are two very basic aspects. One is feeding and another is breeding. So feeding, I mean, now we have better technology to understand that certain types of feed can actually help reduce the methane emission. So that is one simple aspect. But apart from that, breeding is something that needs to be improved. So our low per animal productivity is primarily because of poor genetics and poor upkeep of the animal. And just by educating the farmer and educating the farmer about better genetics, better animal husbandry services, veterinary services at the last mile, I think this productivity can go up. And just imagine if the per animal productivity goes up from 5 liters per animal to 8 liters per animal, that is practically 30 to 40% higher productivity per animal with the same kind of consumption. So the per liter of milk environmental footprint goes down by 30%. And that is as simple as that. So I think per animal productivity needs to go up. Another is on the industry side. I can just quote our example. When in 2007, I just have applied for our first license in terms of pollution control board. We were allowed to set up an effluent treatment plant of 6 lakh liters per day for a unit that processes 2 lakh liters milk per day. That is 3 liters of water being consumed for processing of 1 liter of milk. Now today, we are processing 6 lakh liters of milk with the same effluent output. So that is 1 liter of water for 1 liter of milk. And companies like Amul, I mean, they have more advanced technology. They are processing 1 liter of milk with 700 ml of water. So that is how long we have come in the last 20, 25 years on the basis of technology. Same has happened in terms of power consumption, in terms of logistics, as Mr. Ravichandran said, in chilling of milk, in transporting of milk, more electric vehicles. So I think a lot of work has already been done, and through very simple interventions, a large impact can be made. And since we have more than 33% of the global bovine population, 25% of the global milk output, I think these little interventions will go a long way in impacting the lives of every single person on the planet. So I think it's pretty simple. Just some positive steps need to be taken. Thank you.
Thank you. So while we have a few more areas to cover, but in the interest of time and that we need to wrap up and some of the panelists have hard stops, so let me just pose the last question of this session to Dr. Ramesh Chand to wrap up. You know, policy came up several times and he did recount several policy areas, but one of the crucial issues on the price distorting aspects, whether on the output side or the input side, he himself raised that issue. So what is the way out of this is what we will try to ask Dr. Ramesh Chandan.
Thank you, Shiv Kumar ji. You see, distortions, some can be addressed by simple policy manipulations, but some are complex and require cooperation from different sections of society. Like if I take this subsidy on power for pumping out water, which is not only affecting emission, which is also affecting groundwater level, natural sources, sustainability, etc. We worked with some of the state and suggested to them, and particular I am taking one example, that the total subsidy comes to 8,000 rupee per acre. So without affecting interest of farmer, let us pay 8,000 rupee per acre to the farmers and install a meter and start charging for the power which is used to withdraw the water. In fact, that way the producer get more benefit because now he will use water more economically than when he was using without, when this power was totally free. So I discussed this proposition with many experts, World Bank experts. This is workable, this is doable, but it is only, I think, mustering courage to do this kind of thing. This is the easiest kind of way to deal with subsidy. In the second layer comes fertilizer subsidy. Usha also mentioned about it. Like many of you may not be knowing, 1 bag of urea, the buyer pays only rupees 270. It costs to the government 1,100. Okay, that is the kind of thing. So many a time in my discussion with farmer, I try to convince them that since we have a system of minimum support price, if you are paying 1,100 rupee per bag of urea, the cost of production will increase. And you will get more profit because now MSP formula is 50% more than cost. So I showed them calculation that if you are buying at 1,100 rather than 260 rupees, you benefit. So that is how it works. And again, it can be worked, but we need to take farmer on board. The second aspect is distortion on output side. Here, I feel that in some cases this is done merely as a populist measure. There is, I think, need to look at the larger interest of society and desist from doing damage to the long-term interest of future generations of every section of society that is happening. And also, I think ultimately we need to factor in the environmental cost and natural resource cost so that whatever price policy we are following, it is not based only on financial cost. It also take into account economic cost, environmental cost, and natural resource cost. For example, if we are giving MSP for legume, chickpea, moong, arhar, those kind of things, they fix atmospheric nitrogen in the soils. So per acre, for instance, they fix 15 kg nitrogen. The value of that is, say, close to 1,500 rupees. So that benefit should be added into the MSP because that crop, rather than buying urea for which government has to pay, it fixes nitrogen in the soils. Similarly, it applies to this emission also, and we now have quantitative dimension of all those things so that it can be factored into cost and returns. So I think ultimately we move into that direction, but I also agree that agriculture cannot be singled out for this. We need to do this kind of things, addressing distortion in every sector. Now they are rampant in every sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramesh. And a note of optimism that solutions do exist. Innovation has been happening in this space of dealing with climate change. It's the more accelerated action that we all need to take. Let me thank all the panelists and wrap up this session now. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. On behalf of CII, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the panel members present here. May I request the panel to please step forward for a group photo? May I request Mr. Shivakumar to please give a token of appreciation to the panel members?